If you've ever taken a luxury cruise, just know this. Someone scrubs the decks, empties the bins, and wipes blood off the railings while you sleep. It started with a missing mop. That sounds stupid, I know. But when you're the only night shift cleaner on a 1,000-foot cruise ship slicing through open ocean, you tend to notice when something is off. And on my third week cleaning the Celestial Dream, everything began to unravel with that one damn mop. I'd stashed it in the supply closet on deck 5 after scrubbing puke off the casino carpet. Someone had clearly overdone it on free mojitos. But when I came back an hour later, the mop was gone. In its place was a broom. Not just any broom. It was wet, wrapped in what looked like human hair tangled in seaweed. The smell coming off it was rank, almost metallic. I stepped back, frowning. Someone was screwing with me. I radioed maintenance. "Alton here," I said. "Hey, did someone swap my mop out for a broom in the deck 5 closet?" There was a pause. "Check the posted rules," came the crackled reply. It was Arthur, the supervisor. "What?" I blinked. "Check the rules. Closet rules are changing tonight." Then silence. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that exact response, marked the last normal second I'd ever have on this ship. The rulebook. Every overnight worker on the Celestial Dream was handed a small, weathered rulebook. It looked like something printed in the 70s, yellowed pages and all. No digital copy. The kind of thing you only half read. I skimmed it during onboarding. Rule 1. Never clean the infinity pool after 2:13 a.m. Rule 2. If you see a woman in a red dress on deck 7, do not speak to her. Rule 3. All mirrors must be turned inward by 3 a.m. Stupid stuff, right? Like urban legends passed around by salty old sailors. Except they were very clear that these rules weren't suggestions. They had to be followed. No exceptions. That night, I pulled the rulebook from my back pocket. A new line had appeared, one I hadn't noticed before. Rule 14. Do not question equipment changes. Continue cleaning. That line hadn't been there before. I rubbed my thumb over it. The ink felt fresh, smudged slightly under my touch. I slammed the book shut and glanced back at the broom. Its wet bristles twitched slightly, like something inside was breathing. I didn't touch it. I grabbed a spare mop from a different closet and kept moving, heart pounding in my ears. The stairwell. Around 1:40 a.m., I heard footsteps coming from the emergency stairwell near the aft galley. No one's supposed to be down there that late. No guests, no crew. It's protocol, strict. I walked over, hesitant. The stairwell door was ajar, the metal slightly dented like something had slammed into it. Light flickered beyond the opening. Creak. I pushed it open and stepped in. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, scratches everywhere. Deep grooves, like animal claws, had scraped the steel. I called out, "Security," but my voice just echoed. Then I heard it breathing. Not human breathing. Raspy. Wet. Like air forcing its way through waterlogged lungs. I froze. The sound came from below. The radio on my belt crackled. Deck 3. Aft pool needs cleaning. I jumped. It wasn't Arthur this time. The voice was female. Robotic. Emotionless. A voice I'd never heard on comms before. "The pool's closed," I whispered. Silence. Then static again. "The aft pool needs cleaning, Alton." My name. It knew my name. The pool. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in me screamed to pretend the message never came. But I was already walking. Past locked doors. Through dark halls lit only by red emergency bulbs. Down toward deck 3. The air got colder. And wetter. Like the metal around me was sweating. The aft pool was usually roped off at night, a luxury zone no one touched after hours. But when I arrived, the lights were on. Worse, someone had drained the water. Sludge coated the bottom. Thick greenish-black slime bubbled and popped like it was alive. Something was floating in it. No, not floating. Rising. I took a step back. A hand shot up from the sludge. Long fingers, too many joints, slick skin. It gripped the edge of the pool and began pulling its grotesque body up. I ran. No questions. No courage. Just raw, unfiltered fear. My boots thudded across the deck as I bolted through the emergency exit and back to my supply station. My chest heaved. My mouth was dry. The crew-only deck. When I tried to radio Arthur again, the line was dead. I even tried calling the bridge. Nothing. That's when I saw the elevator was open. The crew-only elevator. The one that never stopped on my floor. Inside it was a cart, my cart. The one I used at the start of my shift and left locked in the forward hall. On top was the mop. The original one. But it wasn't just wet. It was dripping with something thick and black. Attached to the handle was a note. Rule 7 has changed. Proceed to Deck 13. There is no Deck 13 on the ship. At least, not on any blueprint I'd seen. Cruise ships skip that number, just like hotels. Bad luck. But the elevator button for Deck 13 was glowing red. Against everything in me, I stepped inside. The door slid shut. The elevator hummed downward, slower than usual, like it was descending deeper than a ship physically allowed. And then, ding, the doors opened to blackness. Deck 13. There was no light, no sound, just a hallway so dark it swallowed my flashlight beam like fog. The air smelled like rusted iron and stagnant seawater. I stepped out, careful not to breathe too loud. The walls were wet, pulsing slightly under my fingertips. Doors lined both sides. Heavy, sealed, and numbered. They stretched down the corridor farther than seemed possible. Room 1313 stood open. Inside was a janitor's closet, identical to the one I used every night, except everything was reversed. Mirror versions of my tools. Left-handed scissors. A broom with bristles made of teeth. Buckets filled with crimson foam. My rule book was pinned to the wall with a rusted nail. The pages were flipping on their own. New rules wrote themselves before my eyes in jagged ink. Rule 21. If summoned to Deck 13, do not speak. Rule 22. If something speaks to you first, do not answer by name. Rule 23. Do not acknowledge the man in the sailor's hat. That's when I heard it. A shuffling behind me. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Then, a voice like gurgling seawater. Alton. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. My jaw clenched. It said my name. I remember the rule. Do not answer by name. Alton, you dropped your mop. It whispered again. A shadow moved in the hallway. A tall, hunched figure, wearing an old-fashioned sailor's cap tilted forward, his face obscured. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. He stepped closer. Come clean up your mess. His voice made my skin itch. I backed into the room and slammed the door, locking it with a sliding bolt. My radio burst to life, more static, then a familiar voice. Why are you on Deck 13? Arthur hissed. Didn't you read the old protocol? I was told to come here. I started. By who? I hesitated. Exactly. I didn't know. Escape attempt. I stayed locked in that reverse closet for what felt like an hour, heart pounding. The thing in the hall kept pacing, knocking softly, whispering my name like a prayer. Then silence. I waited another 5 minutes. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. No shadow. No sailor. Just the blackened path back to the elevator. I ran for it, rulebook clutched tight in my hand. The elevator door was cracked open. I squeezed in and hit the button for deck 1 over and over. The elevator rose. But I swear on my life, I saw water start to pour down the walls. Not a leak. A flood. Like the ship was filling from the bottom up. And something was swimming in it. Back to deck 1. When the doors opened, I was drenched in sweat, trembling. Deck 1 looked normal. Well lit. No sludge. No sailor. No blood. But something had changed. The walls of the hallways now had carvings, etched symbols that pulsed with red light. A low humming sound echoed through the air like a deep-sea vibration. And worst of all, the rule book was blank. All pages, every rule, gone. Instead, a single message stretched across the inside cover, written in what looked like dried blood. New rules are being written, and you are the ink. The rulebook was empty. No printed text. No Rule 1. No Rule 22. Just blood-smeared pages and the message. New rules are being written, and you are the ink. I stared at it, my hands trembling, the edges of the paper damp from my sweat. The air around me felt heavier, thicker, like I was standing in the deep end of a pool. Somewhere behind me, I thought I heard a bell ring. One of those old dinner bells they use for service on vintage liners. But I was alone on deck 1, or so I thought. The passenger in the hallway. I started walking again, fast but quiet. My shift was supposed to end in 2 hours. 2 long, impossible hours. I just had to make it to sunrise, or whatever counted as sunrise in the middle of the ocean. As I turned a corner by the grand ballroom, I saw someone standing in the hallway. A guest? She wore a tattered white robe, the kind given in the spa, and stood barefoot on the marble floor. Her skin was pale and wrinkled, hair stringy and soaked, as if she'd just climbed out of the ocean. "Ma'am," I called out softly, "you shouldn't be down here. Are you hurt?" She didn't move. Then, in one jarring motion, her head snapped sideways at an unnatural angle, like a bird hearing a distant sound. Her lips parted. The waves remember what we bury. I froze. She raised a single finger and pointed down the hall behind her. The ballroom door creaked open slowly, by itself. Then she collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Gone. No sound. No movement. When I reached the spot where she had been standing, there was no body. No robe. Just a puddle of seawater and a faint trail of footprints that led into the ballroom. Against every survival instinct I had, I followed them. The ballroom. It was wrong in there. The crystal chandeliers were dimmed, swaying despite there being no wind. Tables were set as if a formal dinner had just concluded. Plates full, untouched, with food that looked fresh but smelled rotten. A string quartet's music played faintly from nowhere. Off-key, sluggish. On the far wall, an enormous mirror had been shattered from the inside. Long, jagged cracks spread like a web, and in the center, something dark pulsed behind the glass like a heartbeat. As I stepped deeper into the room, my boots squelched. The carpet was damp. With every footfall, I could swear I heard whispers, dozens of them, all around me. Then the room shifted. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean I blinked, and suddenly, the tables were gone. The lights off. The chandelier was broken on the floor, and in the middle of the room stood a chair. Tied to that chair was Arthur, my supervisor. His eyes were wide open, mouth gagged with a white rag. His shirt was torn, revealing deep scratches on his chest, like he'd been clawed by something large. I ran toward him. "Arthur." He thrashed violently. The moment I touched the rope binding his wrists, the whispers screamed, one voice rising above the rest. You don't get to free him. You're part of this now. I turned toward the mirror. A dozen figures stood in the reflection, though the room was empty. Crew members, guests, me, all staring forward, all with black eyes. Then the reflection smiled. The security feed. I got out of there. Somehow. I don't even remember running. I just remember the pounding in my chest and the cold dripping down my back as I slammed the door behind me. I made my way to the bridge. The night security desk was tucked inside a side room with cameras showing all decks of the ship. I'd only ever seen it once, and Arthur had warned me, don't mess with the monitors. Some things can see you back. I didn't care. I needed answers. The screen showed everything, decks 1 through 12, all pristine, all quiet. Normal. Too normal. Except one. Feed number 13. It shouldn't exist. There was no camera labeled feed number 13. But it was there, and it was showing me, sitting at the desk, staring at the screen. My blood turned to ice. Except in that feed, behind me, on the wall, was a shape. Something tall, gaunt, wrapped in robes made of what looked like soaked life jackets and torn flags. Its hands were long and pale and pressed to the glass of the camera. Then, slowly, its head began to turn toward the lens. I yanked the monitor's power cable from the wall. Everything went black. Rule changes live. My radio buzzed to life. PZZK, crack, pop. Then a voice. My own voice. Reading aloud. Rule 4. Do not stare at reflections longer than 3 seconds. They'll memorize your face. Then static. Then again. Rule 9. If a guest who drowned last week asks for a towel, give it to them. I yanked the radio off my belt and threw it across the floor. It didn't stop. Now I was reciting new ones, rules I'd never seen. Rule 15. If you find a door with no number, do not open it, even if it begs. Rule 19. If your shift ends early, you're already dead. That last one felt personal. Then another came through. This one wasn't a rule. It was a countdown. 1 hour, 37 minutes, and 2 seconds remaining. 2 hours. 2 hours left until sunrise. The drowned corridor. As I ran past the theater, I noticed water creeping along the baseboards. It wasn't raining. No storm. But the ship was leaking from the inside. Down one corridor, water poured from ventilation ducts like blood from veins. The walls were slick, covered in what looked like barnacles and rotted coral. Seaweed slithered along the carpet as though trying to trap my feet. The ship was changing. A transformation was happening, and I was inside it. I turned back. Too late. The hallway behind me was gone, replaced by open ocean. I stood at the edge of an impossible drop. The hallway just ended. Water lapped at the edges. I could see something swimming just beneath the surface. Something huge. Its silhouette passed under me, and I swear, I saw windows on its side. It looked like another ship, a sunken one, or something that was never meant to float. I staggered back. The water whispered, "Come aboard," confronting Arthur. Back near the laundry room, I finally found Arthur again. He was standing upright, still breathing, clutching the side of his head. Blood ran down his temple. "Alton," he said in a cracked voice, "you opened the wrong door." I stared at him. You knew this ship was haunted, infected, whatever this is." He laughed bitterly. "This isn't a haunting," he said. "It's a cycle. Every few years, the rules change. The ship updates. It feeds. Every new rule is written in the blood of the last person who broke it. My throat dried out. And me. You're the first cleaner we've had survive a cycle shift, he whispered. The ship is watching you, studying you, writing you. I stepped away, ball in my throat. Why me? He looked at me then, and something behind his eyes was already gone. Because you read the rules, he said, and now you're helping it write them. The final hour, a new rule appears. Back in the janitor's quarters, I checked the rule book again. This time, the ink was still wet, dripping across the page. One new line burned itself into the paper. Rule 24. At sunrise, one crew member must go overboard willingly, or the ship won't stop. I reeled. It was a sacrifice, and I had a feeling who they were expecting to take that plunge. My hand brushed against my belt, and I realized the mop was gone again. Instead, something heavier was hooked there. A weight belt, the kind divers use when they need to sink. The ship speaks. Lights flickered overhead. A horn blew 3 times. All over the ship, doors unlocked by themselves. Deck 13 was rising again. The sea flooded back in halls. And from every speaker, the voice returned. Not Arthur. Not the robotic female voice. This was deeper. Older. Write the final rule, Alton. I clenched my fists. No. Then sink. The hull groaned. Lights burst. Alarms screamed. And above all of it, one last message appeared across every screen. Across my rule book. Across the elevators, across the ship's glass walls. Midnight comes early. Choose. I didn't sleep. I didn't rest. I didn't even sit down. After that message, midnight comes early. Choose. The ship entered a new stage. The kind of horror that doesn't just haunt the corners of your vision, but reshapes the rules of reality. And I was still here, still breathing, still trapped. The countdown. The lights went red. Not just dimmed, but bathed in crimson, like the ship was submerged in blood. Every hallway shimmered with a thin film of moisture, and from above, a low groaning hum pulsed through the walls. I ran to the main hall, trying to get my bearings. In the middle of the grand staircase, the old analog clock, the one used for ceremonial announcements, had stopped. Its hands were stuck at 12 o'clock. Midnight. Except it wasn't. My watch read 4:03 a.m. Something had frozen time, or maybe rewritten it. Beneath the clock, in wet, smeared letters, almost carved into the wall, was a single line. You don't survive by running. The phantom deck. I tried calling the bridge again. Still static. No response. I even tried the crew comms. Nothing but whispers and distant oceanic sounds. I made my way to the forward stairwell, figuring I'd head back to the engine rooms. Maybe trigger the emergency beacon manually. But the stairwell was wrong. There was a new exit. A hatch I'd never seen before. Metal, rusted, with the number 0 stenciled in flaking black paint. Deck 0. I didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed to run the other direction. But the air pressure in the stairwell shifted. It pulled at me like a current. Like gravity. I descended. The temperature dropped. The metal underfoot was slick, groaning softly with every step. Finally, the hatch creaked open. Inside, black water, 2 inches deep, stretching across the entire floor. This wasn't part of any schematic. It was the ship's heart. The walls pulsed. A heartbeat, faint but present. Something was alive down here. And then I heard voices. Dozens of them. Some familiar. Some impossibly ancient. All chanting the same line in perfect sync. Rule 24 must be kept. Rule 24 must be kept. Rule 24 must be kept. A room of echoes. In the middle of Deck Zero was a chamber. Octagonal. Walls covered in barnacle-ridden mirrors. Inside, tied to a chair, just like Arthur had been, was another figure. Me. I stumbled back. The man in the chair was identical. Same uniform. Same mop stain on his sleeve. Same scar on his knuckle from when I'd cut in the dish pit a week ago. He looked up, his face twisted in pain. "Don't let them choose for you," he croaked. "Write it yourself. Write the rule." Then the mirrors changed. Each one reflected a version of me. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each with a different fate. Some with eyes torn out, some screaming, some calmly smiling while the ship burned around them. Then one mirror cracked, and the reflection inside stepped out. The reflection. It was me, but not me. Taller, paler, hollow eyes, as if my soul had been scrubbed out. He wore the same uniform, only it looked soaked through, dripping black water. His mouth stretched too wide, exposing gray teeth. "You should have jumped," it said. I backed away. "You broke Rule 24. Now the ship chooses." It hissed, voice gurgling like it spoke through waterlogged lungs. I raised the only thing I had, the mop handle, like a weapon. It laughed. Then it charged. We collided hard, crashing into the black water. It was ice cold, wrapping around me like arms. I clawed and kicked, slamming the mop against its head, splinters flying off. It shrieked, bursting into mist as it hit the mirror behind me, shattering it into salt and smoke. Silence returned. My heart thundered. The voice returned, through every speaker on the ship, overlapping, like hundreds of versions of me were speaking at once. "If you won't write the rule, we will." The new rule. I climbed out of Deck Zero and slammed the hatch shut, bolted it behind me. Back in the staff hall, the rule book lay waiting on a table. Open, blank, until it wasn't. One line wrote itself as I stared. Rule 25. If the sacrifice refuses, the ship will claim a deck instead. Claim a deck? I didn't understand until I heard the screams. Deck 9 vanishes. Guests began running down the halls in nightwear, screaming about disappearing rooms and vanishing hallways. I followed one panicked passenger who cried, "My room was there. I swear it was there." He pointed at a blank stretch of wall. I checked the map near the elevator. Deck 9. No longer listed. The numbers went from 8 to 10. Gone. An entire floor erased. I opened the rulebook again. New ink bled through. It will take one every hour until the sacrifice is fulfilled. I stood frozen. If I didn't go overboard, if no one did, the ship would consume itself, deck by deck, passenger by passenger, until nothing was left. Arthur's confession. I found him on Deck 6, dragging a bloodied leg and leaning against the wall like the weight of what he knew was finally crushing him. "You knew this would happen," I hissed. Arthur nodded slowly. "They told me last cycle. They showed me what happens if the rules are broken. I didn't want to believe it. But the ship, it remembers." "Why me?" I shouted. "Why not you?" He looked up at me with dead eyes. "Because I passed it on, just like the one before me did. You passed it on. It's always the cleaner. The ship needs one who touches everything, sees everything, follows the rules without question." My stomach turned. So this was never about cleaning. Arthur gave me a weak smile. No, it was about obedience. And ink. Deck 7's final hour. It was nearly 5 a.m. The air turned frigid. The deck groaned. A low roar echoed through the ship. Then, Deck 7 flickered. Lights popped. Walls cracked. The guests screamed as the floor beneath them warped and sank. Rooms folded into themselves like paper boats in fire. And then silence. Deck 7 was gone. One more hour. The red door. That's when I remembered the rule from earlier. If you find a door with no number, do not open it, even if it begs. I passed that door nearly every night without thinking. But now it was knocking. Hard. Loud. A voice whispered from the other side. Alton, the ship is not the prison. It's the pen. You are the story. I stepped away, but the door's handle began turning on its own. I ran, but the voice chased me through every speaker. Finish the rule, Alton. Finish the rule, and maybe someone gets to live. A decision underwater. At 5:37 a.m., I found myself on the edge of the observation deck, the highest point on the ship before the captain's quarters. The ocean stretched around me in all directions, black and endless. Below, I could hear voices in the water, singing, calling. The sacrifice had to be willing. That's what the rules said. If no one volunteered, the ship would take another deck. More lives, more stories erased. I stared at the ocean, at the horizon, at the storm clouds gathering. Then I opened the rule book one last time. One more blank page, and a pen, somehow tucked into its spine, wet with ink, or maybe blood. I wrote a new rule. My hands trembled as I scribbled across the page. Rule 26. The ship demands stories, but it only spares those who remember. As I wrote the final word, the book snapped shut. A great wind howled through the ship. The countdown stopped. Decks stopped collapsing, but the air around me changed. Because I had written the rule, but I hadn't fulfilled it. Not yet. There's something wrong with the sea. It's not just deep, it's aware. And the celestial dream wasn't just built to float across it. It was built to feed something beneath it. Something old. Something that understands rules. That needs them. And I was no longer just a cleaner. I was the author. The rule I wrote changed everything. After I wrote Rule 26, the ship demands stories, but it only spares those who remember. The screaming stopped. The groaning hull went quiet. The air shifted like a hell breath. But I hadn't fulfilled the sacrifice. I had tried to cheat the rules by writing around them, trying to save everyone with clever ink instead of blood. And for a few minutes, I thought I'd won, until the ship started rising. The ship ascends. It began with the decks vibrating, slowly at first, like a gentle hum, then more violently, as if some great force was lifting the ship. I raced to the observation deck. The ocean wasn't below us anymore. It was around us. Waves weren't crashing against the sides. They were spiraling upward, swallowing the moonlight and forming a vortex in the sky. And from the center of that vortex, I saw it. An eye. Massive. Unblinking. Translucent. It stared directly at the celestial dream. The sea had a god, and we'd broken its ritual. The lost logs of the celestial dream. I needed answers. I made my way to the ship's archive room on Deck 2, normally sealed and off-limits to cleaners like me. But now the lock was broken, and the door hung open like a jaw, unhinged. Inside, dust-laced logbooks lined the shelves. Hundreds of them. Decades old. Even older than the ship's supposed maiden voyage. I opened one at random. June 1936. We tried to skip the offering. 3 decks gone. 47 passengers vanished. We rewrote the rules and tried again. Another. September 1951. The vessel is not sailing. It's orbiting something. The eye reopens when we forget. I flipped to the back of the book. There, scribbled in frenzied, bleeding ink. Do not write a rule to remember. It wants to be known. I staggered back, the truth clicking into place. by writing Rule 26, by encouraging memory. I hadn't spared the ship. I'd summoned the eye. Arthur's final revelation. I found Arthur again near the lifeboats. He looked worse, skin grayer, lips cracked, eyes distant, like the ship had drained most of them already. He saw the fear on my face and just nodded. You read the logs, didn't you? I held the book to my chest. Why didn't you warn me? Because no one can, he whispered. That's the catch. Every rule is a binding contract. Once you start writing them, they write you back. He stepped closer. We're not on a ship. Not really. This place, it's a vessel in the spiritual sense. It floats on memory, on story. It needs sacrifice to erase those stories. Keep the eye of the deep closed. So, when I told people to remember, you undid 100 years of silence. The black room. Then the voice came again, echoing through every wall, every pipe. Arthur. The ship shuddered at the word. Arthur grabbed my arm. You've only got one shot left. The ship will accept either your body or your pen, but not both. I didn't understand until the floor beneath us split open. A chasm of black water appeared, leading down into the ship's true heart. The black room. Arthur pushed me, and I fell into the core. I plunged through freezing air, slamming into a platform of bone-white stone. I was no longer in the ship. I was beneath it, inside its mind. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, carved from barnacle-covered wood. In front of it, a podium, a scroll, and a pen. On the walls, carvings showed every cleaner before me, each one writing, bleeding, or diving into the abyss. Then, one final carving, unfinished. My face, blank eyes. The eye was waiting. Two final options. A voice entered my head. Clear, cold. Write the final rule, or offer your flesh. I stared at the pen. I could end this. Save the ship. Save the passengers. But what rule would be enough? The sea god didn't want peace. It didn't want life. It wanted narrative, suffering, sacrifice, a tale worth remembering. Then I knew. I had to offer the one thing that it craved most, a loop, a cycle, a forever story. I wrote the final rule. Hand trembling, I dipped the pen into my own blood and wrote, Rule 27. The cleaner must always return. When the eye opens, he comes again. Different face. Same name. Alton. Forever. The scroll curled shut. The pen vanished. The floor trembled. A surge of light swallowed me, and I felt myself unraveling. Not dying. Rebooting. I woke up in my bunk. Clean uniform. Bright fluorescent lights. The ship's intercom chirped overhead. Now arriving at Port of San Juan. Crew, please report for docking procedures. I sat up. My head throbbed. My rule book was on the nightstand. Pristine. Leather-bound. Fresh ink. I opened it. 26 rules, perfectly printed. And one blank page. Waiting. Arthur passed by my door. Same uniform. Same limp. He nodded. You made it, he said. This time, I want to scream. To ask if it was real. If the eye had closed. If I'd saved anyone. But I knew the truth. The rule I wrote had saved the ship, but doomed me. The loop begins again. I stepped out into the hallway. New guests were boarding. Laughter. Suitcases. Champagne trays. Music. The celestial dream looked brand new. Shiny. Beautiful. But beneath it all, under the decks, the rules, the smiling faces, something waited. Watching me. Reading me. It remembered. And now so would I. Because I'd become part of the ship's story. And I would clean it, night after night, year after year, until it asked me to write again. The strangest part about returning to life is how ordinary it feels. The ship gleamed again. No slime on the walls. No screams. No missing decks. The celestial dream was in full swing. Champagne flowing, jazz playing, tourists sunbathing beneath bright deck lights like nothing had ever happened. But I remembered. Everything. The black room. The eye. The rule I wrote. Rule 27. The cleaner must always return. When the eye opens, he comes again. Different face. Same name. Alton. Forever. I was the loop. The sacrifice. The ink. And now, the ship was waiting for the next drop of blood. The new cleaner. His name was Alton, too. I watched from behind a hallway pillar as he stepped aboard. Fresh uniform. Confused eyes, same department shoe duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I'd seen this exact moment play out before, because I was him. He passed by a steward who gave him the same weary nod I'd once received. And then the ship spoke to him. Crew ID, Alton 17. Night shift begins at 11:45 p.m. Please consult your janitorial guidebook for safety regulations. He didn't flinch. Not yet. He was too new to hear the other voice beneath the automated one. The voice only I could still hear. The one from the eye. He's clean. Not broken yet. But he will be. The memory curse. I should have faded after I wrote Rule 27. Most who write the final rule disappear into the current, their story sealed. But I did something different. I gave a ship a living story. One that renews with every rotation. And so I stayed. Not alive. Not dead. Stuck in the walls, the mirrors, the dark pools under the stairs. Sometimes I walked freely among the crew, invisible. Sometimes I was just a whisper in the fog glass of the observation lounge. But always watching. Always remembering. Because I had to remember. That's what the eye demanded. That's what the ship was. A vessel of memory. A god of story. And I was its archivist. Arthur again. And again. I found Arthur drinking alone in the lower lounge. Still limping. Still older than time. You remember this round? I asked, sliding into the seat beside him. He didn't even flinch. Just raised his glass and nodded. Cycle 17, he muttered. This one's slower. Quiet storms. Fewer screams. Do they ever change? I asked. The rules. Arthur tapped the table. The rules change us. Not the other way around. That's what you wrote, remember. He passed me something under the table. A folded note. Worn and damp. On it, scrawled in charcoal. Rule 28. When two remember, the loop begins to fray. I looked up. He was already gone. The mirror test. I found Alton, 17, near the ballroom mirror. It had reappeared after the last reset, clean, polished, flawless. But it was still hungry. I watched as the new Alton leaned in to fix his collar, eyes lingering just a little too long. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The reflection blinked before he did. He stepped back, confused. Then he looked at the janitor's handbook in his pocket and opened it. Still only 26 rules. The last page was blank. Waiting. I watched his lips move as he read silently. Then, faintly, like a whisper in his mind, he heard it. Rule 27. The cleaner must always return. He dropped the book. I stepped out from behind the column. He didn't see me, but he felt me. Goosebumps ran up his arms. The eye was cracking through. The loop was spooling tight. A whispered choice. Later, I found him asleep in the break room. The rule book lay open on his chest. And I tried something forbidden. I whispered directly into his ear. You don't have to write it. Break the chain. Save them all. His body twitched. His brow furrowed. He murmured my name in his sleep. Alton. Then a voice came from the ceiling vent. The ship itself. Violation. Unauthorized intervention. Reset pending. The temperature dropped. The room blurred. Time began to loop. Reset, error detected. But something cracked. I felt it. The memory held. The whisper stuck. He remembered. The next day, Alton, 17, skipped his assigned route. Went off map. Avoided the aft pool. Ignored the stairwell to deck 0. He even locked the supply closet himself and threw away the cursed broom. The eye saw it, and it stirred. The ocean grew violent. Lights flickered. Screams erupted below deck 6. A new message appeared across every monitor. A rule has been denied. Memory conflict detected. Sacrifice required immediately. The pen returns. In the captain's quarters, a room no cleaner should ever enter. The scroll and podium had returned. Only this time, it wasn't me standing before it. It was him, Alton, 17. And I stood behind him, unseen, watching him sweat and tremble as the pen hovered in the air. The ship wanted him to write Rule 27 again, to restart the cycle. But he didn't. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a matchbook from the ship's bar, and burned the page. Fire licked the ink. The scroll screamed. So did the eye. Breaking the story. The ship convulsed. Lights burst. The decks warped like they were melting. Every speaker shrieked. Alarms howled. The hallways blurred into water. Then, silence. The eye blinked. Once. Twice. Then closed. Permanently. And the ship settled. Passengers woke up in their cabins, dazed but alive. Crew members looked confused, as if waking from a long, foggy dream. Deck 0 disappeared. Decks 9 and 7 returned. The mirrors shattered and didn't heal. The rule books turned blank. The rules were gone. All of them. Alton, 17, lived. He walked off the ship in San Juan with nothing but his duffel and a new scar running along his left palm. The last trace of the cycle. He never spoke of it. Not to reporters. Not to family. Not to anyone. But he remembered. Because when I passed him in the crowd, no longer a shadow, but a man again, he looked at me and smiled. Just once. Like he knew. Like we both did. One last rule. The ship sits dry dock now. Retired. A rusting hull. A forgotten name. The celestial dream is no longer in service. But late at night, when the fog rolls in thick and the tide pulls hard against the shore, some say the ocean shifts. And if you listen closely near the hull of a forgotten ship, you'll hear a whisper etched into the steel. Rule 29. If a story ends, don't write a new one. Because not all stories deserve to live again. Some need to sink. The end.